Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. U.S. President Donald Trump repeated his pledge to sell coveted F-35 fighter jets to Saudi Arabia during a meeting with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the White House on Tuesday, a development with potentially significant security ramifications for the region. Speaking to reporters alongside MBS, Trump said the F-35s would be, quote, pretty similar to the ones used by Israel, and called the kingdom a, quote, great ally. Israel is currently the only country in the Middle East with F-35s, the premier fighter jet used by the U.S. and core NATO allies, and the sale to Saudi Arabia could provoke concerns within the Israeli security echelon. The U.S. is legally committed to support what is known as Israel's qualitative military edge in the region, and Trump said during the meeting that Israel would be okay with the sale, likewise describing them as a great ally. Also of note is that Trump's 2019 plans to sell the jets to the United Arab Emirates were ultimately nixed by the Biden administration over concerns about that Gulf state's ties with China. In this episode, we hear from Al Monitor's Pentagon correspondent, Jared Szuba. Jared takes us through why Trump wants to sell the F-35s to Saudi Arabia, what the sale would mean for the balance of power in the region between Israel, the UAE, Iran, and others, and why the deal might not go through so quickly due to concerns about China's influence in the Gulf, potential opposition from Congress, and more. Hope you enjoy. Jared, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Adam, thanks so much for having me.
Jared, this is obviously a significant news item. Only Israel has F-35s in the Middle East. I want to ask you, why do you think Trump made the pledge to sell the F-35s to Saudi Arabia? What's his reasoning and calculation here?
Yeah, that's a good question. The bigger picture about why now, I think it's important to realize that this so far is really just a verbal pledge. At this point, it's not clear that Trump got what he wanted out of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Out of the meeting that we saw, at least, the part that was broadcast to the world, there was no apparent movement or concession on the Saudi side for bin Salman's conditions for normalizing ties with Israel. And there was no commitment by Trump, no firm commitment at least, for U.S. support for a Saudi civil nuclear energy program. Trump paid a bit of lip service to that, saying he could foresee that in the future, but he said that it is, quote, not urgent at this time. So F-35s are the sale of Lockheed Martin's, or authorization of the sale of Lockheed Martin's F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which is, NATO's premier stealth-capable fighter jet. That's just one part of what has been a broader deal in the works for a couple of years now, dating back to the Biden administration. Now, Saudi Arabia was the first Arab state to receive U.S.-made F-15s in 1982. I mean, Israel was the first to receive them in the region 6 years prior, and I think it was 76, and I believe that was partly as a reward for Israel's agreement to withdraw from the Sinai Peninsula. But using the using the F-15 as a sort of example of how these deals tend to shape up in the region, the sort of preferential authorizations the U.S. gives to its strategic allies. Speaking of the F-15, Egypt still hasn't received it, despite Israel receiving them in 1976, Saudi in 82. That despite a push during the first Trump administration to approve F-15 sales to Egypt. And when I spoke to Trump administration officials at the time, there was reluctance to do that because the question internally was, well, what could the Egyptians possibly want these for? Now, taking this back to the current moment, I imagine at least some Israeli national security officials and certainly some U.S. lawmakers are probably asking or soon will be asking themselves the same thing right now about Saudi Arabia and the F-35. That is, what could they possibly want these for? It's a bold gesture from the Trump administration, but it's going to have to get past Congress. Israel's qualitative military advantage is enshrined in U.S. law, and it's hard to see this proposal getting through the four corners, key lawmakers in the House and Senate, without Saudi Arabia being at least on the cusp of ready to normalize ties with Israel. The ball is in Trump's court now, and let's see next move, if they have any next moves on the Palestinian issue, if they can move these discussions forward.
And just honing in on something you just said, what do you think are the main reasons Saudi Arabia wants these F-35s?
Well, it's a good question. I think that's not clear publicly, at least. I mean, I think Saudi Arabia has serious ambitions under Mohammed bin Salman for military modernization in the coming decades. It would be unprecedented among its neighbors, other than Israel, as you've mentioned, for them to have the F-35. No other Arab state has them. For all the issues and problems that the F-35 has faced in sort of maintenance and capabilities, they are capable of penetrating, of the airspace of most of those countries in the region, essentially undetected. They've allowed Israel, which now has 3 squadrons of F-35s, to take out targets in Lebanon, in Syria, to fly over Iraq, to reach essentially all the way to near to Tehran, and conduct strikes in Tehran. Taking out targets without being detected by the local air defenses of Israel's neighbors. So that's a big capability for Saudi Arabia to have. It's a big question what Saudi Arabia would want these for. Saudi Arabia is not a country that has a tremendous amount of experience conducting, bombing campaigns in neighboring countries. I mean, the obvious exception to that is the campaign against the Houthis in Yemen, which of course was halted, or the U.S. halted its support for that campaign due to outcry over a number of pretty horrific civilian casualties incidents that were inflicted by Saudi pilots. Of course, the United States military was assisting with that targeting, advising and assisting with Saudi targeting and target development in Yemen. So it's not clear what they would want them for. I'm sure. I think it's reasonable to assume that Saudi Arabia's neighbors, not just Israel, but also likely the United Arab Emirates and Israel, are wondering what they're going to want them for as well. Now, we're a long way off from Saudi Arabia being able to sustain, a bombing campaign in the region or a strike campaign in the region, without direct U.S. support. But I think there are plenty of countries in the region, military officials and leaders who are wondering what this is going to mean for Saudi Arabia's trajectory in the coming decades as a sort of regional military power as well. Again, worth noting that this sale is far from guaranteed for going through, but a lot of questions.
And on the point of the kind of regional dynamics at play, from a regional defense point of view, what would be the significance of Saudi Arabia acquiring these? Would that trigger any possible reaction from Israel or the UAE, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think the United Arab Emirates is likely to be keen to match the capabilities of the Saudis. There's a bit of a rivalry there. Whether or not they would go back to the United States to bring prior talks that were shelved in 2020, 2021, to bring that back on the table about potentially acquiring the F-35, that remains to be seen. The Israelis seem to be keeping their cards close to their chest. We saw some reporting from our colleague in Tel Aviv this morning, Ben Caspit, that this proposal by Trump to sell the Saudis the F-35 is really ruffling some feathers in the Israeli national security establishment. But remember, back in 2019, when the Trump administration wanted to sell F-35s to the UAE, it just took a few weeks of coordination before Netanyahu's government signed off on being okay with that. That being said, the balance of power has certainly shifted in the region over the past year plus. Iran is essentially left without air defenses. Is this a sale that could give Saudi Arabia potentially the future to strike within Iran at will? So there's a lot of complex questions about what this capability would do to the balance of power. And like I said, it's hard to imagine Saudi Arabia acquiring these aircraft without without Israel's consent, and two, without normalizing ties with Israel, if not more, in terms of building a relationship formally with the Jewish state.
Aside from the Abraham Accords, which might be tied to any such finalization of an F-35 deal, what are some other things we might see if this deal were to go through? Would a defense guarantee from the U.S. be on the horizon potentially to go along with an F-35 deal?
Well, I think actually we should turn that around. I think it's worth asking what may precede this F-35 deal, because just because Trump says he intends to sell them doesn't mean Saudi Arabia is going to buy them tomorrow. Congress is going to approve it and they'll be delivered, within a year. This is going to take a long time, and there are going to be a lot of obstacles to that. Like I said, the F-35 proposal, the Trump administration previously, in its first term in office, proposed selling F-35s to the UAE, rushed that through at the last minute in 2019. Yet there was just immediate opposition from lawmakers. If you recall, Congressman Meeks in the House vowed to oppose that, even if the United Arab Emirates were to normalize ties with Israel. So expect now he didn't have to do that, of course, because that F-35 sale proposal was essentially shelved by the Biden administration, which officials were citing security concerns regarding the UAE's relationship with China. But like I said, there are a number of obstacles to this. First, the real question is, what is Saudi Arabia going to have to do first to make sure that this offer by President Trump, which is what I think we should see it as, has the best chance of going through?
And finally, taking a step back, what do you think are the main reasons the F-35s haven't been sold to anyone else in the Middle East besides Israel until now? Because the US obviously has a number of close partners in the region. Is this solely a matter of Israel's qualitative military edge, or have there been other concerns?
No, there certainly have been other concerns. Obviously, Israel's QME is the sort of elephant in the room in these discussions, and the existence of that on the books, from Congress, makes it much harder for any administration to sort of sell these out willy-nilly. Uh, but there are other concerns as well. I mean, one of them, cited by the Biden administration, are security concerns for the F-35's technology. Obviously, China, which is the United States' major global adversary, has stolen or is accused of having stolen tremendous amounts of sensitive U.S. military technology. As some analysts have pointed out, the F-35 really is a black box. It's not exactly easy to just park an F-35 in a third country, and even if agents working on behalf of the Chinese government were to gain access to some of it, whether visually or in other ways, it's not exactly likely that the Chinese could copy this overnight. It's a pretty secure system. That being said, the Trump administration can use claims about security concerns as leverage to pull Saudi Arabia away from other sensitive arrangements that it doesn't want, that Washington doesn't want Riyadh to have with Beijing. The Biden administration certainly did this, and the Trump administration can also use Congress's opposition to sort of gain further concessions from Saudi Arabia. From Saudi Arabia. Several countries in the region, maintain significant ties with Russia and China, including on intelligence, and on what U.S. officials call dual use, potentially sensitive technology. The U.S. has tried over a couple of administrations to cajole countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE away from that with limited success. If you remember the pressure on those countries about Huawei and 5G networks in those countries during the first Trump administration under Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. But the big picture in the region is, some of these countries, broadly speaking, not specifically speaking about Saudi Arabia or the UAE or any individual country, but the region itself has a history in the last half century or so plus of some of these countries aren't necessarily there's not a tremendous amount of confidence that all of these countries are going to be deeply inherently stable in their political systems for the foreseeable decades. I mean, we saw just within the past decade and a half, you saw revolutions in Egypt, revolution in Syria. This is still a region in which politics is very much contested, in which great power competition between the U.S., Russia, and slowly but increasingly with China is still very much playing out on that stage in the region. So yeah, insofar as advanced fighter jets are an insurance policy for a government like bin Salman's, from a superpower patron or partner like the United States, that's certainly may ease things. But I think we're going to have to see whether or not the Trump administration is willing to decouple this F-35 deal from a bigger, broader set of guarantees and assurances, or if Congress is going to allow that. But it is worth noting that the U.S. can claim, security concerns or claim to have security concerns surrounding the F-35 and its technology, and use that as leverage to pull Saudi Arabia or other countries, as the Biden administration did with the United Arab Emirates, away from sensitive arrangements with Beijing that Washington doesn't want to see those countries have. The real question, I think, is does the Trump administration have the personnel in place within the U.S. government to verify and to get the access that is needed to assure that Saudi Arabia can keep high-end U.S. tech like the F-35 and its, say, electronic warfare systems, for example, safe from foreign and adversary espionage.
Jared, thanks a lot for your time, and we look forward to more of your reporting on this from Washington.
Sure. Thanks so much, Adam.
Thanks for listening to the Al Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.